Hello everyone and welcome to another fragrance review. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel and watching my videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at a fragrance from the designer house of Valentino, and the name of this fragrance is Uomo. Now, Uomo was released in 2014. This fragrance was actually scheduled for release in 2015, and the perfumer for this fragrance is Olivier Polge. Now, of course, Valentino is a high-end designer, very much like, Victor and Rolf. This fragrance was actually originally scheduled for release in 2015, being that it is an Italian designer. It initially became available in Europe, and then it wasn't scheduled to be released in North America until 2015. We actually got it a year early, so quite fortunate about that. Now, of course, they originally started off with clothing and accessories, and in 1978, Valentino debuted their first fragrance for women, and then, of course, the most recent release is this one in 2014. So they currently have 20 fragrances. 16 of them, however, are for women. The other 4 are for men. So yeah, they do cater a little bit more for the feminine crowd, but that's all right. Back in 2005, I believe it was, mid-2000s, they did release Pour Homme for men, which is a very unusual fragrance containing tamarind, vanilla, and pink pepper, sandalwood. So even when they do make fragrances, they don't make fragrances that are bland and generic, run-of-the-mill, perfunctory. They actually make fragrances that really do stand out and take creative risks. So of course, they enlisted the help of Olivier Polge for this fragrance, and of course, Olivier Polge is responsible for the original formulation of Dior Homme, released back in 2005 by Christian Dior. He's responsible for Midnight in Paris by Van Cleef & Arpels, La Vie est Belle by Lancôme, has even done Spice Bomb and Flower Bomb for the house of Victor and Rolf, as well as many, many other fragrances. So, of course, they enlisted his help for this fragrance, but in the past, they have worked with Alberto Morillas, who has done Acqua di Gio, as well as many other perfumers from Givaudan and IFF and other companies of that nature. So, I'm going to let you know what I think of this fragrance in just a bit, but next up, let's take a look at the presentation for Uomo by Valentino. Valentino Uomo is available in 2 sizes, 1.7 ounces and 3.4 ounces. The size that you see here in front of me is the 3.4 ounce 100 milliliter size. It's the big size, and this fragrance is only available in eau de toilette concentration. First off, I do want to apologize. I think I have a tester bottle here. I do not have the box for this fragrance, but I have seen the box in person and in pictures, and from what I remember, I think it's actually made out of like a fabric material, really nice construction. It's not just a cheap cardboard material on it with a glare. It's actually a really nice box, and even the label on the front of the box that says Valentino, the name of the company, on it is not just a sticker, but it's on there pretty firmly, and is also of a fabric material. So really nice construction in the box, but again, it's not anything too fancy or too ornate. Now, the real highlight of this presentation is the bottle. So when you look at the bottle, it has this beautiful studded pattern encompassing the entire perimeter of the bottle. This is going to go down in the books as one of the most beautiful bottles, and you're going to see people 10, 15, 20 years from now still very proudly showcasing this on their shelves. This is going to go down in the books as a classic bottle design. On the bottom here is where you have the information, like the name of the company, the size, Puig. Of course, this is owned by Puig now. They were previously owned by Procter & Gamble, now owned by Antonio Puig, the Spanish company. So this is made in Spain, and I don't have a cap for mine. I don't know if that's just because it's a tester. I have seen some with a cap. They don't cover up the entire perimeter of the rim, but I have seen caps for this fragrance before. And then here you have the curved plaque on the front with Valentino engraved into it. Just beautiful construction of the bottle. If you're looking for the serial number, it's not on the bottom. Contrary to what I thought, it's actually right here below the neck on the left side of the bottle. Now, the atomizer for this is a pretty okay distribution. It sprays out enough juice relative to the concentration of the fragrance, and just a beautiful bottle again. Honestly, this is one of the nicest presentations that I have seen for a designer men's fragrance in a long time, and that has pretty much been the presentation for Uomo by Valentino. Now, what you'll first get from this fragrance when you first spray it is a citrusy introduction. Now, I know bergamot is listed as a note in this fragrance, and bergamot is a very generic smelling type of a citrus note. And when this does open up, you do get a little bit of that. Now, it may be a synthetic aroma chemical that's giving off that vibe, perhaps citrol or linalool, but it opens up in a generic citrus way, and the citrus in this fragrance lasts for about 30 seconds to a minute. It's very ephemeral, very short-lived, it does not last for a very long time. And then it quickly transitions into the mid of the fragrance, where it contains something called Janduja cream. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, Janduja cream consists of primarily chocolate, and from the reading that I've done online, 30% of it is hazelnut. So it's this cream or a spread that's composed primarily of hazelnut and chocolate. And you do get a sweetness from this fragrance. It's sweet, but it's nutty and balmy at the same time. Now, when I think that, I think of Tonka Bean. Tonka Bean is a very cheap, inexpensive, and very common ingredient that's used in perfumes and colognes and fragrances overall. And that's because it contains a chemical compound known as coumarin. Coumarin has a very nutty sweetness to it with a vanillic overtone, and there is something about this fragrance that smells a bit vanillic, but it doesn't necessarily smell overly sweet, gourmand, or confectionery. So I really like that about it. It's very modest and humble in the amount of sweetness that it contains, but at the same time it does contain this balmy quality to it. Now, this fragrance has gotten a lot of comparisons to another fragrance by Christian Dior called Dior Homme. Actually, the original formulation back in 2005 when it was originally released. The funny thing about that is that Olivier Polge composed both this fragrance and Dior Homme by Christian Dior. So it is inevitable and undoubtable that he used a little bit of the DNA from that fragrance, as well as another fragrance that he did called La Vie est Belle from the house of Lancôme, in creating this fragrance, as this fragrance gets compared not only to Dior Homme but also to La Vie est Belle. So it takes its best of both worlds, basically, put it like that. So it does have this mildly citrusy introduction. Really, it's very easy to overlook, very easy to miss. Transitions into this powdery, not necessarily powdery, more balmy than anything, and it kind of reminds me of iris, the smell of iris. So if you've ever smelled Dior Homme, this one will undoubtedly and inevitably get compared to Dior Homme, because it does have this irisy quality to it, but a note that's contained both in Dior Homme and this fragrance is the note of leather. Now, nothing about this fragrance smells particularly rawhidey or animalic or anything like that, so it's not animalistic in that sense, but whatever leather is contained in this fragrance comes across smelling very smooth and just not like leather at all. I think it's just very obscured by the sweet elements of this fragrance, although they're not overly sweet, so please bear that in mind. I know this fragrance also contains a note of cedar wood. In the dry down, perhaps I smell something woody about this fragrance. Can't quite put my finger on whether or not it's cedar wood or any other different, type of wood. I can't really make that distinction, but I guess in the dry down it does smell a little bit woody. And then it also contains the note of myrtle, which is supposed to be a Mediterranean type of an herb. I really don't get that either. What I do get from this fragrance, though, is a little bit of that hazelnut and chocolate thing that it has going on with this balmy mid, or this balmy heart that smells a lot like iris, and then it dries down to this Tonka Bean coumarin type of a dry down. Even though it's not listed as a note, I am getting a little bit of that. So yes, this fragrance does get compared a lot to Christian Dior's Dior Homme. It also gets compared a lot to La Vie est Belle by Lancôme, but Olivier Polge is the composer for all three of those fragrances. Now, in terms of compliments or complaints, I think this fragrance is definitely going to land you a compliment. I have only been testing this fragrance out now for a few days, but I have already gotten 2 or 3 compliments, and they have all been overwhelmingly positive. I have already run through a bit of the bottle, as you can see here in front of me, and yes, this is a fragrance that will undoubtedly land you compliments. You're definitely not going to get any sort of negative feedback or attention from this fragrance. Now, have I worn this fragrance outside of testing? Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I just finished testing, but I see myself wearing this a lot more in the coming months. This is actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, this is probably one of the best releases, if not the best release of 2014. It's going to be very hard to top this one, especially in the designer game. So guys, thank you so much for watching. That was my review of the smell of Valentino Uomo. Last up we have the rating. Take care. First up we have uniqueness and overall smell, and I ended up giving Uomo by Valentino a 9 out of 10. Now this is a great smell. I know it bears a lot of similarities to Dior Homme by Christian Dior, La Vie et Belle by Lancôme. I have smelled both of those fragrances and I really can testify and say that yes, it does bear a lot of similarities to those two. Keep in mind the perfumer is Olivier Polge and he has done those other two fragrances as well. Now the overall smell is a great one. I don't know if fixatives were necessarily used very successfully, as I tend to get 7 to 8 hours from this fragrance, which is pretty average I think for the concentration, but nevertheless it's not beastly longevity or projection, but really great smell. Again, it does bear similarities to other fragrances, so in terms of creativity and uniqueness I couldn't give it the whole 10 out of 10, but Dior Homme in my mind is one of the best men's fragrances released in the past few years, and this one is right up there with it. So great smell, 9 out of 10. Next up we have longevity, and I ended up giving this fragrance an 8 out of 10. Longevity is actually pretty good. I get 7 to 8 hours. I have gotten 9 hours on a good day, but keep in mind that it is going to be within that range. It's not beastly longevity, but it does perform really well, especially for its concentration. Next up we have projection. I ended up giving this fragrance a 6 out of 10. The projection on this one is not that great. It does project for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then it starts sitting a little bit closer to the skin. I don't think it ever radiates too far beyond an arm's length, but the projection for this fragrance is quite decent. I would say it's on an average level, so I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10. Next up we have versatility. I ended up giving this fragrance an 8 out of 10. I think this is a very versatile fragrance. First of all, I know it says Uomo and it's marketed for men. I think this is a very unisex fragrance. I can see both men and women wearing this fragrance very comfortably, as a matter of fact. In terms of social scenarios, this could be worn in a suit and tie, perhaps even casual, but I do think that this is mostly like a nighttime, night out fragrance if you're going to a bar or a club or a party or just a night out on the town. I think this fragrance is a perfect candidate for that type of a scenario. And I think in terms of season, this is a year-round fragrance. I think this will do really well in the colder months because of the compositional nature, but because of the performance, the concentration, I also think it could do pretty well in the hotter weather as well. Probably not in the dead of summer. It might become cloying, even though, like I said, the sweetness is not overdone, but perhaps in the summer it could become a little bit cloying. But I can definitely see this as a 3 or 4 season type of a fragrance, and I think that this one could work for a younger crowd all the way up until an older gentleman. Probably not anyone past their 50s or so, but definitely could work for a younger crowd. It does have that playful, almost youthful quality to it. So I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10 for versatility. Last up we have the presentation. I'm going to give this one a 10 out of 10. I know there's nothing too fancy about the box, even though I didn't have it in my presentation, but I already let you guys know what I feel about the presentation, and I think the bottle is going to go down as a classic in perfume history. So I ended up giving this one a 10 out of 10. Really beautiful looking bottle. And then I'm going to give this fragrance an overall rating of a 9 out of 10. I think this is a great fragrance, and it's definitely, I think it's going to go down in the books. It's going to go down in history as one of the best fragrance releases for men, and definitely it is going to, I think, characterize an era, if you will. So guys, thank you so much for watching. That was my review of Uomo by Valentino. If you own or have tried this fragrance, please let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below. Also, please don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to shoot me a message. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. And lastly, again, thank you so much for watching. This has been Steven with another fragrance review from Red Essence. See you next time.